So I undertook a self-education campaign, and learned. And that changed everything. I discovered I discovered things about chant. I found out that that Ave Maria chant was just the beginning. That the chant hymns I aspired to learn, the basic chant hymns that we think of all the time, that are in the parish book of chant, it was just the beginning. I didn't know anything about prophets. I discovered the prophets. And I discovered something like several million beautiful compositions, And I realized, too, something very interesting about chant, namely that if you utterly devote your life to it every day and did nothing but chant, and lived an average lifespan, you wouldn't get through it all. So, that told me something very interesting. In my own lifetime, I can't learn all the Gregorian chant. I can't master this stuff myself. The most I can hope for is to be just to be a small part of something much bigger, something that extends beyond my lifetime in both directions. So I learned that I have a different kind of place in the universe than I had previously thought. That I'm just here for a little bit of time, and that the most I can do is make a small contribution. But it's a small contribution I can make, but I can make an important contribution in the sense that I can contribute my voice to continuing this glorious tradition, making it pass from this age that preceded me to this age that will go on after my death. And in that sense, I will have fulfilled this vocation that I think I've been called to, which is to sing. So that's our job as musicians. And what does that do to your outlook? It brings upon you a certain kind of humility. And if I were going to name one central word of the disposition of a church musician, it has to be, above all else, humility. Now, humility is not compatible with waging wars in your parishes. This is the problem. We want sacred music, so we're going after the people who don't give it to us. This is a very aggressive, almost arrogant disposition. That's incompatible with what we want to do at Mass, which is to decrease so that the Lord can increase. So how do we navigate these two? How do we negotiate these two things? It's difficult to balance out our intense, at least in my case, very intense, almost dogmatic desire for liturgical music, genuine liturgical music in my parish, with the spirit that liturgical music requires of you and instills in you, which is a sense of peace, a sense of humility, a sense of understanding that your place in the scheme of things is actually quite small. And this is a difficult balancing act. I can't really give you the answers as to how this plays itself out in your own life, but I would say this, that it's impossible to do this without an intense prayer life. That's the first step to singing chant, is to pray. Pray about it, and to fix yourself up in a spiritual way, because ultimately that's what chant is. It is spiritual music, and it is the music of Catholic prayer life. In today's world, we're living in this very interesting transition, because in the same sense that our lifetimes are very short in the scheme of things, we live through a very short period of time in history, dating from about 1963 up until very recently, in which sacred music almost went completely away. Many hearts were broken, many professional careers were lost, many vocations were lost. There was bloodshed and destruction all over the place. Sometime following the immediate end of the Second Vatican Council and the current day. The irony is almost impossible to imagine, because you had a church council here that was the first church council in the history of the church that so overtly proclaimed Gregorian chant to have primacy of place in the Mass. I mean, remarkable, isn't it? Interesting thing about the way this world works, right? Church council says this is the way it's going to be, and then really, almost immediately, the opposite happens. I think there are a number of reasons for this. and we could talk about that all night. We'll let the historiographers, settle that. You could say that the council's wishes were betrayed. That maybe that's one way to put it. It's a slightly, maybe a little bit exaggerated. I think ultimately we confronted a cultural problem, and things were unleashed at the council that nobody had really expected. But I think it's a good idea to look back at what the council actually said about music, to understand what it is we should be doing. The world of music was not a perfect place before the Second Vatican Council. The normative mass, the typical mass you would attend, and those of you who were around back then can testify to this, it was a low mass. And decades prior to the Second Vatican Council, there was permission given for vernacular hymn to be sung at low mass. I mean, this means hymns in English. And that's what emerged to what's called now disparagingly the four-hymn sandwich. There was a processional in English, an English hymn, and there's an offertory hymn, and then there's a communion hymn, and then there's a goodbye hymn of some sort. And rouse you up, again. Now, the only difference between then and now is that now the styles have changed, really. I mean, what you hear in the typical parish, the style is well, frankly, a little goofier in some ways, I mean, but that's about it. But if all we're satisfied with is returning to traditional hymnody, like instead of the table of plenty, or what's the typical recessional that you hear? What gathers in? Well, what's a recessional that you hear today? That 1 in 5/4. Have you heard that?
Sing of the Lord.
Yeah, there we go. Sing of the Lord. It says sing of the Lord's Son. Then it would be Holy God, we praise thy name. But musically, from a liturgical angle, there's not that much difference between them, both in the vernacular, both of them are metered hymns. One's more dignified than the other. But, and I think aesthetically, from my point of view, we'd be making progress if we just use something like the old St. Gregorian hymnal and sing a bunch of old style hymns. That would be a little more at peace, I think. But the point is that we're not achieving any more closely to what the Second Vatican II sought to solve. What Sacrosanctum Concilium tried to address was the problem that the Mass was not being sung. You have a low Mass being said very quietly by the priest. It's a very beautiful low Mass. I don't know how many of you have ever been to an old 62 rite low Mass. It's a very beautiful contemplative thing. But it's not supposed to be the normative Mass. It was really supposed to be the exception, not the rule. So the Second Vatican Council comes along and says, look, we've got to do something about restoring the sung Mass as the norm that we experience all the time. Let's try to find ways to make this easier. First, we'll legislate it. Gregorian chant has pride of place, And then we'll authorize a kind of liturgical reform that makes it a little bit more close. That maybe some reformers after the council is closed can do some work to change the structure of the Mass around a little bit here and there to make this reality become more known. So what many people expected to happen after the Second Vatican Council was a Mass in which the priest sang his parts out of the Missal, the Schola sang its parts out of the Gregorian Romanum, or another book like the Gregorian Simplex, which came out, I guess it came out in the 1960s. These are seasonal antiphons for the paupers. And the people would sing the Kyriale, which is the book of the ordinary chants. Kyrie, Gloria, Credo, and the Agnus Sanctus and Agnus Dei. And those were the people's parts. And that this would be the norm.